Have you ever wondered how close you've come to danger without even realizing it? At Shivering Vault, we take you there, one story at a time. But before you drift off, consider liking this video, commenting where you're watching from and at what time, and subscribing to keep these chilling stories coming. Now, let's dive into these unsettling tales. It was a quiet Thursday night in late September. The kind of evening where the air feels crisp enough to wear a jacket, but not so cold that it feels uncomfortable. A soft breeze stirred the dry leaves on the ground, and I remember feeling this strange sense of stillness hanging over everything. Maybe it was because it was so late, almost midnight, and most of the complex was asleep. The world around me seemed to be on pause. I didn't think much of it at the time, but looking back, it feels like the whole night was leading up to that moment. I live in a small, almost forgettable apartment complex on the outskirts of town. It's one of those places that looks like it could use a fresh coat of paint, with cracked pavement in the parking lot and dim, flickering lights on every building. It's quiet, which I guess is nice. My apartment is on the second floor of one of the low-rise buildings. The laundry room is located at the back of the complex, past the last row of parking spaces. It's a small, nondescript building that always looks like it's been there a lot longer than it actually has. It's the kind of place you only go to when you absolutely have to. And at 11:30 p.m., I didn't feel like waiting until morning. I had worked late and wanted to get the laundry over with. I wasn't tired yet, and the laundry room was usually empty at this time, so it felt like a good opportunity to get it done without waiting around. I grabbed my basket and made the short walk from my building to the laundry room. It was cool outside. The breeze felt nice against my face. The parking lot was almost deserted. A few cars were scattered here and there, parked under the dim streetlights. It's one of those places where you're used to seeing the same cars night after night, the same old sedans and trucks. I put my clothes in the washer and then slipped my headphones in. I wasn't in the mood to just stand there and stare at the machines. Instead, I decided to put on a podcast. The voices from the speakers made me feel less alone in the cold, sterile space of the laundry room. I let the monotony of folding clothes take over, trying not to let my mind wander too far. The sound of the podcast, muffled by the soft thrum of the washing machines, was comforting. After about 20 minutes, I finished loading my clothes into the dryer. I stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The night felt a little warmer now, as though the breeze was trying to push back the coolness of the evening. As I walked toward the exit, I couldn't help but glance at the parking lot again. At first, nothing seemed out of place. The usual cars were parked in their spaces, some with their headlights off, others still lit. But then something caught my eye. At the very far edge of the lot, under the flickering street lamp, there was a dark blue sedan that I didn't recognize. I had never seen it parked there before. It was sitting in a space that didn't really have anything around it, just a patch of cracked asphalt and an old, overgrown hedge that ran along the perimeter of the complex. The car was too still. The engine was off, and the windows were rolled down just enough to let in the night air. At first, I thought it was nothing. It's not unusual to see a car parked in the lot, especially late at night. But then I noticed something. There was someone sitting inside. I didn't see their face, not at first. It was hard to make out any details through the tinted windows, but I could see the silhouette of a person slouched in the driver's seat. They weren't moving. Their posture was unnervingly still. It was like they were deliberately hiding in the car, watching. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself that it was just another person waiting for someone. Maybe they were tired. Maybe they had pulled over to rest for a bit. But then I saw the figure shift slightly, just enough for me to notice. Their head turned in my direction. I couldn't see their face, but I could feel their gaze. I finished up quickly, grabbed my clothes, and walked briskly back toward my building. My mind was racing, and I kept glancing over my shoulder. The parking lot seemed quieter than usual. The only sound I could hear was the crunch of gravel under my shoes and the distant rustle of leaves in the trees. Then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of an engine starting behind me. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I didn't turn around immediately, but I could feel the car moving. Slowly, deliberately. The engine hummed softly, and I could hear the faintest sound of tires rolling over the pavement. I couldn't help it. I glanced back over my shoulder. The dark blue sedan was creeping down the lot, moving at a snail's pace, headlights off. The figure inside, whoever they were, wasn't making any attempt to hide. It felt deliberate, like they were following me, watching my every step. I couldn't tell for sure, but I knew that if I didn't act quickly, I was going to be in trouble. I picked up my pace, trying not to break into a run. The complex was eerily quiet. There was no one around. No one in sight, no sounds of anyone coming or going, just the steady hum of the engine behind me. By the time I reached my building, I was almost out of breath. My hands were trembling as I fumbled for my keys. I glanced back again. The car had stopped, parked just a few spaces down from where I had entered the building. I hurried inside, slamming the door behind me. I locked the deadbolt and pressed my back against the door, trying to catch my breath. My mind was racing. My heart was pounding so loudly I thought it might burst out of my chest. I couldn't stop thinking about the man in the car. Why had he been watching me? What did he want? I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering as quietly as I could. I think someone's following me. I don't know what to do. He's in the parking lot. The operator on the other end asked for my address and details. I gave them as quickly as I could, my words tumbling out in a rush. But as I spoke, I heard something. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps just outside my door. My breath caught in my throat and I froze. I could hear them getting closer, and then they stopped. The sound of a doorknob jiggled softly. My heart raced and I held my breath. There was no way he could have followed me inside. Was there? But after a while I heard something else. Footsteps, fading away down the hallway. The police arrived within minutes, their sirens blaring in the distance. I could hear their footsteps as they walked up the stairwell, their radios crackling in the otherwise silent building. They knocked on my door, asking me to open up. I could barely speak, but I unlocked the door and let them in. They asked me to describe everything that had happened, and I did. Everything from the car in the parking lot to the footsteps outside my door. The officers seemed to be taking the situation seriously. They immediately started searching the area. I could hear their voices in the hallway, faint but growing clearer as they moved toward the back of the building. They paused, then I heard one of them call out, "We've got him!" A few moments later, they returned with a man in tow, handcuffed and looking disoriented. He was thin, pale, with dark hair and a scruffy beard. The police had found him crouching near a back patio, hidden in the shadows. They searched his jacket and found a knife, a pair of gloves, and some other tools. It turned out he'd been stalking the complex for weeks, watching the residents and learning their routines. He'd followed several women home, waiting for the right moment to strike. My heart dropped as I realized that I might have been his next target. But somehow, I had caught on before it was too late. My quick thinking, my decision to call the police, had probably saved me, and maybe others too. The man was arrested and taken away, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something far worse. I later learned that several other residents had reported strange sightings. Cars parked late at night, figures lurking in the shadows, but no one had ever put the pieces together until that night. I never did laundry at night again. I couldn't help but wonder how many other people he had been watching. How many others he had been following, just like he followed me. It was a quiet Thursday night in late October, the kind of night where the air is crisp and sharp, and the streets are empty except for the occasional car passing by. I had just moved into a small duplex on the edge of town, about 20 minutes outside Sacramento. The house wasn't much, just a tiny place with a living room that barely fit my couch and a kitchen that looked like it hadn't been updated in years. I had a roommate, but she was out of town visiting her family for the weekend. So, for the next few days, I had the whole place to myself. At first, it felt weird, but I was used to living alone. In fact, I kind of liked the quiet. It gave me space to study without distractions. I was in my final year of college, studying late into the night for an exam that I couldn't afford to fail. The clock on the wall read 10:30 p.m., and I had just finished reviewing a set of notes when I realized I hadn't eaten anything substantial all day. My stomach growled loudly, a reminder that I had skipped lunch. The coffee from earlier had worn off, and I needed something to keep me going through the night. I grabbed my phone and opened the delivery app, scrolling through the options. There was a local pizza place that I'd tried once before, and it was close enough that I wouldn't have to wait forever. I wasn't in the mood for anything fancy, just something comforting to fill the void. After a few taps, I confirmed my order and sat back in my chair, hoping that the food would arrive quickly. As I waited, I tried to focus on my notes again, but my mind kept drifting. I glanced out the window, looking at the still street outside. Everything was so quiet. Around 10:50 p.m., I heard a car pull into the driveway. I glanced up from my notes and saw headlights flash through the window. The delivery driver had arrived. I got up from my desk, stretching my stiff muscles, and made my way down the hallway toward the door. I opened it, expecting to see a familiar face. Young, maybe in their 20s, someone who'd just finished a shift and wanted to drop off my food quickly before heading home. But instead, standing there on my doorstep was an older man. He was probably in his late 50s, maybe early 60s, with graying hair and a thick mustache. He wore a cap pulled low over his eyes, and his expression was unreadable. He didn't smile or greet me in the usual friendly way that delivery drivers tend to. Instead, he just stood there for a moment, holding the bag of food out to me with both hands. I took the bag, but he didn't immediately let go. His grip on it tightened, just enough for me to feel it. I looked up at him, feeling an odd sense of discomfort. "Thanks," I said, trying to keep things casual, but my voice felt thin, almost shaky. "You live here alone?" His voice was gruff, like he wasn't used to speaking to people. I hesitated, unsure how to answer, but I gave a short nod. He didn't move, his eyes not quite meeting mine, but focused somewhere over my shoulder. "No boyfriend around?" I shifted uncomfortably, trying to ignore the odd tension that was building between us. "No," I said quickly, "I'm just studying for an exam." Again, he didn't let go of the bag, standing there in silence. It was like he was waiting for something else, but I didn't know what. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, trying to speed up the interaction. "Look, I've got to go," I said, finally pulling the bag from his grip. He nodded slowly. "Stay safe," he said, his voice lowering slightly as he stepped back from the door. I didn't say anything else. I just closed the door quickly, locking it behind me. Something about the way he'd looked at me, the way he'd asked those questions, made my skin crawl. It wasn't normal for a delivery driver to ask such personal things, right? But I tried to shake it off. It was probably nothing. Just some strange guy who had a weird way of interacting with people. I turned away from the door, back toward the living room, and decided to focus on my studies. I opened the food and set it on the coffee table. But even as I ate, I kept thinking about the exchange, the questions, his eyes. I couldn't get the feeling that something was off out of my mind. As the hours passed, I tried to get back into my study routine, but my focus kept slipping. The night felt heavy, like the silence was pressing in on me. I kept looking at the clock, checking the time. Midnight, 12:30, 1 a.m. I knew I should have gone to bed, but my mind was too restless. I couldn't shake the unease from the delivery. I decided to take a break. Maybe I was just tired. I stood up, stretching again, and decided to walk around the house for a bit to clear my head. I made my way down the hallway to the kitchen, my feet soft on the hardwood floor, the air growing colder as the night deepened. I opened the kitchen window slightly, hoping to let in some fresh air, and stood there for a moment, just listening. That's when I heard it. A soft click, the unmistakable sound of a latch being undone. I froze. It came from the back of the house, from the backyard gate. My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't sure what I was hearing, but it sounded like someone was outside. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself, and crept toward the kitchen door that led to the backyard. Before I could make it, I heard a faint rattle, soft at first, then louder and more aggressive. The back door handle was shaking. Someone was trying to get in. I quickly turned off the kitchen lights and grabbed my phone, my hands trembling. I pressed myself against the wall, my back to the kitchen window, praying that whoever was outside hadn't seen me. I dared to peek through the blinds, just a sliver. I couldn't see clearly at first, but then there he was, the delivery driver. He wasn't wearing his cap now, and I could see his face more clearly. His eyes darted around the backyard, looking for a way in. He was staring at the back door now, trying the handle again, this time with more force, as if he thought maybe it would give way. I stood frozen, unable to move. My phone was still in my hand, but I couldn't bring myself to call the police. Suddenly, there was a shout from outside. "Hey, I already called the cops! Get the hell out of here!" I jumped at the sound of Mr. Alvarez's voice coming from next door. I hadn't realized he'd been watching. The delivery driver froze, his eyes wide. But before he could react, he turned and disappeared into the shadows between the houses. Minutes later, the flashing red and blue lights of the police cars lit up the street. I heard sirens in the distance, getting closer, and my stomach turned. I backed away from the window, not daring to move until I saw the officers arrive. The police questioned me, asking about the man, but I was in a daze, trying to process what had just happened. They searched the area, finding footprints around the back door. The next morning, I was still in shock. I barely slept. I kept replaying the events over and over in my mind. A few hours later, I got a call from the police. They'd found the delivery driver. He was hiding out in a nearby park, and they arrested him. It turns out he wasn't even a legitimate employee. He'd stolen someone else's delivery account using fake credentials. He had a criminal record from another state with charges for breaking and entering. That afternoon, I packed a bag and went to stay with a friend for a few days. When I returned to the house, I installed security cameras, got a dog, and changed my routines. I couldn't take any chances. I never spent another night alone in that house. The whole experience stayed with me, reminding me that even the most ordinary moments, like ordering a pizza, something so simple, can become a nightmare when you least expect it. My name's Marcus. I'm a 27-year-old graphic designer. I work freelance, which means I spend a lot of time on the road. But this job, it was last minute, and honestly, I probably shouldn't have taken it. But money's money, right? I had a rush project in San Diego that I had to get to. It was around 2 a.m., and I was driving down from Northern California. The kind of night where everything feels like it's in slow motion, the highway stretching on endlessly, headlights carving through the darkness. The car had been my only company for hours, and the silence was starting to get to me. I could feel the fatigue pulling at my eyes, each blink growing longer, my body begging me to stop. I hadn't intended on taking a break, but the road was starting to blur together. The coffee I had earlier had long worn off, and all I had left were the low hums of my car's engine and the occasional creak from the seat as I shifted. The highway felt endless, especially at that hour. As the miles passed, I started to notice how quiet it was, not just in my car, but outside too. The only sounds were my tires rolling over the asphalt and the soft buzz of the air conditioning. No crickets, no animals in the distance, just the eerie silence of the road at night. I could see the exit sign for the rest stop about a mile away. I had debated pushing on, but the sleepiness had taken over. I knew I needed to pull over before I ended up making a mistake. My eyes were heavy, my head drooping. It was either stop here or risk falling asleep at the wheel. I decided to stop. I made the turn off the highway, the tires crunching over the gravel as I rolled into the lot. It was mostly empty. There was a single truck parked at the far end, but otherwise the place felt desolate. The only other car was a sedan, parked a little farther from me, its windows fogged up. It looked like someone had been sitting in there for a while. I locked the car and reclined the seat, deciding to take a quick nap. I set the alarm on my phone for 45 minutes. It was a restless kind of sleep, where every little noise makes you jolt awake, only to fall back into a light, fitful doze. I was barely asleep when I started hearing the faint chirping of crickets outside my window. I closed my eyes again. The breeze outside whistled, rustling the leaves of the trees. The lot was still. But eventually I slipped into a deeper sleep, trusting that the alarm would wake me up in time. I'm not sure how long I'd been asleep when I woke up. I thought I'd heard something faint. The soft crunching of gravel like someone was walking. I groggily opened my eyes, blinking against the harsh light of the dashboard. I glanced at the clock. It read 3:04 a.m. But it wasn't the alarm that had woken me up. It was the sound. The gravel. Someone was walking on it, close to my car. Really close. I froze. My breath caught in my throat as I laid perfectly still, trying to keep my body from reacting. I couldn't move. I could hear every shift in my body, involuntary twitch of my fingers, every heartbeat pounding in my ears. I could feel the cold sweat beginning to form on my neck. I could hear the gravel underfoot. It was slow, deliberate, like someone was trying to sneak up on me. And that's when I realized it wasn't just someone walking by. Someone was outside. They were walking right by my car. My eyes flickered to the side mirror. At first, all I saw was darkness. But then I saw him. A man, crouched low, just on the other side of my passenger door. His silhouette was hard to make out, but I could tell he was watching me. His movements were slow, calculated, like he was testing the boundaries, waiting for me to make a sound. I felt my heartbeat spike in my chest. Panic was starting to creep in. I had to do something, but my body was paralyzed. I just kept staring at him through the mirror, my mind racing, trying to figure out what the hell was happening. I glanced toward the door. The handle, it was locked. But this didn't feel like a random person. This wasn't a guy walking by. Then, he reached for the handle, tugging it gently. No real force, just a little test. The sound of the handle rattling. Locked. A small sense of relief flooded through me. But it was short-lived. He didn't move away. He just stood there for a second, his fingers lingering on the handle. Then, without warning, he started moving around my car, his footsteps light but deliberate, like he was taking his time. I glanced at the rearview mirror. The man was now on the driver's side, close enough that I could see the faint outline of his face in the dim light. It was hard to make out details, but the outline of his hoodie, pulled up tight, was unmistakable. His face was partially hidden in the shadows, but I could see the shape of his eyes, wide and intent, scanning the car. I could feel my pulse thundering in my ears, and then, bang! His fist slammed against the window, hard. The shock of the sound made me jump. I barely caught my breath before his fingers started jabbing at the handle, trying it over and over again, as though he was trying to get in no matter what. It was too much. I don't know how I did it, but instinct kicked in. My hands fumbled for the ignition, and I threw the car into gear, the engine roaring to life. The tires screeched as I slammed my foot on the gas, fishtailing out of the parking lot. I didn't even look back. I didn't care about anything except getting the hell out of there. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold the steering wheel. I glanced at the rearview mirror. No sign of him. I drove like a maniac for what felt like an eternity, but I couldn't stop shaking. My eyes kept darting to the rear view, half expecting to see headlights trailing me, or him, his dark figure, lurking in the shadows behind me, but nothing followed. I didn't know if I was being paranoid, but I didn't stop until I found a gas station 30 miles down the road. My hands were still trembling when I pulled in. My breath was ragged as I stepped out of the car, my legs wobbly. The gas station was quiet, but it felt like the safest place I'd seen in hours. I wasn't just lucky, I was alive. I never stopped at a rest stop again. It wasn't unusual for me to crave some time away from everything. I've always been someone who finds peace in solitude, but not too much solitude, just enough to disconnect, clear my mind, and breathe without the noise of daily life. So when my aunt asked me to look after the family's cabin for a weekend, I jumped at the chance. It's located in the northern hills of California, not far from a small town called Ashford Pines. I'd been there plenty of times as a kid, but I hadn't been back in years. The cabin itself is pretty old, a relic from the 1970s, but it's been maintained over the years and holds a lot of memories. Surrounded by thick pines and high ridges, it's isolated, sitting about a 20-minute drive from the nearest neighbors. There's something comforting about it. When you step outside, all you hear is the wind rustling through the trees and the faint chirping of crickets and night creatures. There's a sort of stillness that feels almost like the world is far, far away, out of reach. I drove up late Friday afternoon, the road winding through hills and forests, the sky tinged with the pinks and oranges of a setting sun. When I pulled up to the cabin, the air was thick with the smell of damp earth and pine needles. I unpacked my things and set the place up for the weekend. It felt good to be there, to be away from the hustle of my usual life. The crackle of the fire, the scent of burning cedar, and the low hum of wind through the trees, it all made everything feel cozy and safe. As the sky darkened, I got comfortable on the worn leather couch in front of the fire. I opened a book and tried to lose myself in its pages, the crackling fire adding a rhythm to my thoughts. The wind outside was picking up, a gust brushing the trees and making the cabin creak. I didn't think much of it. I was used to that. This place was old, and it made noises sometimes, especially on windy nights. I lost track of time, the hours slipping by unnoticed. Then around 10:30 p.m., something made me pause. A soft, almost tentative knock echoed from the back door. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but when it came again, a little louder, a little more deliberate, I stood up and walked over to the door, confused. I checked the window beside it, but there was nothing to see. Frowning, I stepped outside and looked around, but the yard was completely still. The only sounds were the rustling of the trees in the wind. I felt a prickle of unease. Maybe it was some curious animal or a stray cat pawing at the door, though it didn't quite sound like that. I went back inside, locked the door again, and tried to shake it off. But my mind wasn't quite settled. The cabin was so isolated. Who would be out here at this hour, knocking on the door like that? I kept thinking about it, my mind returning to that strange knock every few minutes. I tried to focus on my book again, but it was hard. The stillness of the place, the isolation, seemed to grow heavier. I decided to make some tea, hoping the warm drink would settle my nerves. As I poured the boiling water into my mug, my eyes glanced back out the window at the yard. That's when I saw it. muddy boot prints in the soft ground outside. They weren't just a few steps, but a full circle around the cabin, over and over again. My heart began to race. There was no way anyone had walked through the mud earlier. I had checked when I arrived. Everything had been quiet. I grabbed my phone and stepped outside, cautiously walking around the cabin, my breath visible in the chilly night air. The footprints were clear, deep, like someone had been pacing around the cabin, waiting. Was someone out here? Someone who had been watching? I quickly locked the back door and made sure the windows were secure again. I wasn't sure what to do. I couldn't see anyone, but the prints were unmistakable. They weren't fresh exactly, but they'd definitely been made that night. It was then I decided I should call the sheriff's office. It seemed like the right thing to do, even if nothing had happened yet. I wasn't sure if I was overreacting or if I should be taking it more seriously. But after the knock and the prints, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I called the number for the local sheriff's department. The dispatcher answered, her voice calm but with an edge of concern when I explained the situation. "Ma'am, it's going to take about an hour for anyone to get out there. Are you safe inside?" "Yeah, I'm inside. Everything's locked up, but there's something odd. Footprints around the cabin, and I heard someone knock at the door." "Stay inside and don't open the door for anyone, okay?" she said, her voice firm. "Do you see anyone right now?" "No," I said, glancing around. "I haven't seen anyone, but I'm worried there's someone outside." "Understandable. Just stay put. We'll get someone out there soon, but it'll take a while." I hung up and tried to settle in again. I grabbed a blanket and wrapped myself in it, my eyes darting to the windows, then back to the fire. The sound of the wind outside seemed to grow louder, the trees creaking and swaying. But then I heard it, a soft, crunching sound. My heart stopped. It was too deliberate to be an animal. Someone was out there, walking around the back of the cabin. I held my breath, straining to hear. The footsteps stopped for a moment, then started again. They circled the cabin, just like the prints outside. My pulse quickened. What the hell was going on? I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 again, but this time I didn't have to explain much. The dispatcher's voice was already laced with urgency. "Stay inside, ma'am. We're sending someone out as fast as we can." I stayed on the line with her, whispering, "Someone's outside. I can hear them walking around. Don't engage. Lock up everything and stay hidden. Do not open the door for anyone." I felt trapped. I couldn't just sit there. I checked the locks on all the windows, then pulled the curtains shut. I tried to stay calm, but my hands were trembling and the silence around me felt suffocating. And then it happened. A shadow passed the living room window, flitting by so fast I almost didn't see it. But I did. Someone was outside. I backed away from the window, my heart thundering in my chest. I was frozen for a second, not sure what to do. Then the scraping sound came from the back door. Someone was trying to open the window, prying at it with something. My breath hitched. In a panic, I bolted upstairs to the attic, hiding myself in the small crawl space behind the rafters. The space was cramped and cold, but I didn't care. I just needed to be hidden. My phone was clutched in my hand, and I whispered my updates into it, my voice shaking. I could hear the intruder downstairs, moving through the cabin, rummaging through the kitchen, opening drawers, tea, and pulling things out. The creaking of the floorboards was too loud. They were getting closer to the stairs, to where I was hiding. I pressed my back against the cold, splintered wood of the attic, barely breathing, as I listened to the footsteps coming closer. It felt like an eternity before the sheriff's deputies arrived, but it was probably only about 45 minutes. My body was trembling with cold and fear, my thoughts swirling in a haze of panic. Every small noise outside, every creak of the cabin made me flinch. I stayed as quiet as I could, trying to control my breathing. When I finally heard the sheriff's voice downstairs, I couldn't help but exhale in relief. I climbed down from the crawl space and crept down the stairs, careful not to make a sound. The door was still wide open, and the lights from the sheriff's cars outside illuminated the house in an eerie glow. Deputies were already inside, looking around. One of them was at the back door, examining the locks, while another checked the windows. The place had been trashed, drawers were opened and emptied, the contents scattered across the floor. "What happened?" I asked, my voice shaky. I could barely look at the mess. "We found signs of forced entry," the deputy said, his voice calm but concerned. "Looks like whoever did this was trying to get in, but they left when they heard us coming." "There's no sign they were here for long," he said, scratching his head. "We believe the man who's been staying in an abandoned cabin about a mile from here was casing properties. We think he was looking for a place to rob. Your cabin was just one of several he had been watching." I felt my heart sink. "So, it's over? They're gone?" "For now," he said, his face grim. "We've got patrols out looking for him, but he's probably long gone by now." I nodded numbly. By the time the sheriff's deputies left, it was close to dawn. The sky had lightened slightly, but the woods outside felt just as dark as they had when I first arrived. I packed up my things early the next morning, too rattled to stay. The sun had barely risen, but I couldn't bear to be in the cabin any longer. I drove back to the city as quickly as I could, the roads winding through the quiet hills. I don't know if it's the isolation or the fear of being alone out there again, but I can't bring myself to return to that cabin. Not after what happened. The idea that someone had been watching, waiting, pacing around my home while I was inside, completely unaware. It still haunts me. I think about it often, and I don't think I'll ever be able to feel safe in such an isolated place again. That's it for today's tale from Shivering Vault. If you have a story worth sharing, drop it in the comments or send it our way. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your fellow thrill seekers. As always, the Shivering Vault thanks you for unlocking today's tale. Until next time, the vault awaits your return.